Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is Ukraine War, I guess frontline update, part that I didn't really expand enough on when I did it earlier. And actually, since it is the year anniversary of Kherson being liberated, the city being liberated in the Kherson counteroffensive that took place last year, obviously a year ago now, I thought I would do a bit more justice to the area and what's been going on over the last few days, because I don't have time to do an extra today, as I would also like to do. So let's just remind ourselves as to what has happened in the Dnipro River area over the last day or so. If you remember from when I looked at it this morning, there are some gains, not quite in the Pidstepny area that we had seen over the last few days, or in the Krinky area where we have seen also over the last few days, week or so, but actually further to the southwest of Kherson, where there's this strip of land that had been, a strip there that has been liberated by the Ukrainians that in pushing the Russians back. So there is that. No reports reported that the AFU opened a new axis of attack on the left bank during recent operations and managed to retake positions on the northern datches of Potemkin Island, moving south, and that they've taken positions north of Belarudove, northwest of Holopristan. Okay, so that was also kind of hinted at yesterday with what Syriac Maps, a pro-Russian mapper, has said in this island area. As you can see on my map with the pins here, you've got these dacha, this settlement area that stretches alongside part of the river delta as it comes to the southwest of Kherson. So that is another area of successful attack for the Ukrainians, and we'll have to watch how that develops. And in conjunction with that, if you remember, I was saying there were some hits in Hladivka and possibly elsewhere with regard to HIMARS striking a column of trucks. Only three out of the 11 trucks got away without being damaged or destroyed, and a lot of KIA soldiers there as well taken out. And they would have been supporting the defense of this area where the Ukrainians have been making some gains. It appears that they would have popped up there. They're on the way to defend that area and were taken out by HIMARS. So not only are we seeing this combined arms maneuvers using all sorts of different elements of the armed forces, including a lot of drone and counter-drone activity, electronic warfare activity, but we're also seeing artillery being used, in this case HIMARS being brought to bear in the area where we might not have seen it so much recently in Kherson, or at least used so close to the front lines, often hitting targets much further back. So there is lots of footage of all these vehicles being taken out and the associated personnel around there. Then I reported as well that Russian sources are reporting heavy fighting and importantly talking about Russians themselves having weak counter-battery fire warfare and a big problem with electronic warfare. Enemy drones, so Ukrainian drones flying over our positions as if they were at home, while our drones are shot down and landed on territory controlled by the Ukrainians very quickly. So there is that, as I was talking about there, that competitive advantage that the Ukrainians have in using all these threads of warfare together. Now, the latest is that things are going quite well, possibly up in Krinky too. So Krinky is further along past these settlements of Poima. So you got Oleshki, then you got Poima, Pishchenivka, and Pidstepny, where there's lots of pressure by the Ukrainians, but it's also here at Krinky where they are expanding their control of the territory. Well, No Reports has just reported, or relatively recently this afternoon at least, fighting towards the M14 continues. Russian sources confirm that the transfer of more Ukrainian armoured vehicles onto the left bank. In general, Ukrainian Marines are expanding their zone of control, which will soon show in the form of videos. That is the claim. There are some claims that the Russians are going to be putting reserves in, and it will be a lot harder for the Ukrainians. I discussed that in the frontline update this morning. In the ISW, they said that there were claims that the Russians had possibly moved back a little further, pushed back in the forests south of Krinky. Here we have the Ukrainians hitting Russian vehicles in the forest area. This is geolocated to very close to the settlement of Krinky. And so I'm not 100% sure of the timing for this. So that would suggest that the Ukrainians might not have pushed so far into the forest area as has been claimed. But again, I can't be so sure about the timing of that. That might have happened before the Ukrainians pushed down south, because there's talk about the Ukrainians being in this forest area and that being difficult for the Russians to flush them out. So that might be a little bit of a watch how positive you are thinking about Ukrainian advances there. Lots of people are fairly positive. Here's Randy Mott saying Russia failed to shift enough forces earlier to cut off these lodgements. Now they are facing a stronger Ukrainian force and losing the ability to hit river crossings. Once that is completed, the Ukrainians can flood the zone with heavier units. This was continually dismissed as only a raid, but I think it was more like the seed of a bridgehead reacting to the Russians where the opportunities arose. Now, again, that's a very positive outlook. David D, another very positive Ukrainian voice, saying, things are looking good in the area, and doing a bit of wargaming on exactly what he thinks could be the case. Here's an analysis that I wanted to share this morning, but I actually forgot to, in all honesty, but it would have made the video a little bit longer, so probably good to leave it to here. Now, this is from yesterday, so bear that in mind. A situation report from the Kherson Theatre of Operations. Information in this thread is widespread on Russian channels and therefore does not violate OPSEC. Ukrainian forces have expanded their control over considerable areas on the Russian-occupied bank of the river, says Alexander X, who is analysing the war in Ukraine. So they have also been strengthened by reinforcements, so that there are now several hundred Ukrainian troops holding and consolidating positions and advancing on the Russian-occupied bank. Note the preparations for this operation have been ongoing since far back as July. And I think, as I've said before, this was somewhere they were hoping to attack previously, but they were waiting for the pincer movement and success, much greater, quicker success in Robotyne area here in the Zaporizhia front line. But that didn't really happen. So they have had forces amassed here, I think, or at least some decent forces, but they didn't bring them to bear. But actually, there were some Marines operating over in the Velika Novosilka area that were then subsequently brought down to here. So maybe it wasn't ready to go as early as that, because it's those Marines now that I think are having the effect there. Ukrainian positions and advances on the left bank. He says Ukrainian forces have now firm control over positions reaching from Antonivsky Bridge, that's a road bridge, to the railway bridge, and then east of that, so shown in the blue area in the map below. So here are the different areas. You've got Krinky up here, you've got the Antonivsky road bridge here, and you had the railway bridge just there. They're elements of Ukrainian control in different areas along that front line. So Ukrainian troops are also conducting assaults through Poyma, Pishkinivka and Pidstepny. Ukrainian troops have also established positions between Pidstepny and Kazachi-Lahiri. So somewhere around here as well, there might be a bit of a bridgehead or some kind of foothold, and are consolidating the same. He says Ukrainian forces have expanded their control of Krinky and the surrounding areas and are now storming Russian positions on the southwest and south of Krinky. The Oleshki Novokakovka road has been cut in two places by these assaults, and Ukrainian troops are advancing past the road and into the woods bordering the desert. So that's the desert, as they say there, and the two places the road has been cut is claimed to be here. So this is this yellow road on my map, much larger road than the one that directly connects the settlements all along the river. This is a more important logistics route that then eventually sort of can go up Novokakovka and then inland and into a number of different places. The claim here is it has been cut in two places, there and there, or something like that, before you get to this kind of more dusty desert area below that. Okay, to continue the analysis, Analysis of Ukrainian tactics. This is an excellent area to establish a beachhead. Because the Aleshki Sands desert is impassable and acts as a massive shield against Russian counterattacks, any counterattacks will therefore have to come along the banks of the Dnipro River, and these can be held under heavy artillery fire from the Ukrainian-held bank of the river. While Ukrainian assaults continue, the desert again complicates Russian attempts to defend the area, giving them no space to maneuver or retreat. They literally fight with the desert at their backs. Ukraine continues to use a new class of indigenously manufactured drone with longer range to engage the enemy. These drones have been reverse engineered from the Iranian Shahed drones. Russian forces in the area of the present operation are under heavy fire from drone directed HIMARS strikes as well, which is something that obviously I've just spoken about. Analysis of Russian force strength in the area. So Russian forces in the Kherson theatre of operation are highly depleted and likely do not possess sufficient forces or reserves to impede Ukrainian advances in the area. Now, this is where you have to be careful, because this is a very positive outlook. There are some who say there are more Russian reserves than you think there are, and they can possibly bring them to bear here. If you go and listen to, as I say, Andrea Perpetua's live stream from last night, there is somewhat the other side of the coin to this, or at least, not quite saying that it's as doom and gloom as, say, Avdiivka might be, but they need to be careful, the Ukrainians here, as this could go either way. Reinforcement from other sectors is also highly unlikely, says this source, with Russia presently conducting heavy assaults in areas like Avdiivka and also attempting to defend Zaporizhia. It is therefore unlikely that Russia has combat-ready reserves to spare for the Kherson theatre of operations. The thing about the Russians, though, is they can more easily throw combat not ready reserves. In other words, just boots on the ground, people that they're just putting through a very quick training, mobilized from their crypto mobilization and their general sort of conscription and everything that they do to generate forces on a regular annual basis. I'm sure that they are able to throw boots at the ground even if they aren't the best. Anyway, Russian minefields in the area have been swept away by the flood that triggered by destroying the Novokakhovka Dam, and this simplifies Ukrainian assaults in this theatre of operations. That's something that did happen. I don't know how much they have gone to replace those minefields that were lost. Russian forces have placed demolition charges on civilian infrastructure in the area, just as they did before their withdrawal from Kherson. A key to the map. In the map below, blue areas and blue arrows show present areas under Ukrainian control, all vectors for Ukrainian assaults. The Russian flags show location of Russian units, and the Ukrainian symbols that show the location of Ukrainian ones. My image on the map, surrounded by bright green circles, shows my rough location within a rather vague kilometer or two. So he's actually in place here, and so speaking from something of experience, or at least knowledge, one would assume. The yellow line shows the beginnings of the impassable terrain. This is the Aleshki Sands desert. So I thought that was an interesting little analysis, and of course take all of these claims with a pinch of salt. I think this is going to be a fascinating area to watch in terms of what the Ukrainians can achieve. I think they've done fairly well here and are taking advantage of the asymmetry in terms of electronic warfare and drone capability. This will also have an effect on other things. It's not just, your drones aren't just used for, say, first-person view drones. They're used for spotting, which is artillery, which is counter-battery fire, which is HIMARS. And if Ukraine have that advantage in the air with drones, then they have the advantage on the ground with support for their maneuvers from artillery and counter-battery fire and HIMARS strikes on logistics and so on and so forth. So they can bring these threads together and really create a meaningful, I think, bridgehead along the river in a number of places that could turn into something more significant. But of course, the Russians are going to have to make some choices here. And as many people often say, you don't want to present the opposition in a war with problems, because you can find solutions to problems. You want to present them with dilemmas where there are no solutions. There is just like less bad or less bad or equally bad, and don't really know which one we should do. So if you present Russia with a dilemma here, which is, do we defend in force Dnipro at the expense of not defending Zaporizhia, or not being able to attack in Avdiivka, or not being able to pressure in Bakhmut, what do we do? Can we do all of those things? And again, to use my analogy of a blanket that's not quite big enough for the bed, by pulling that blanket towards the Dnipro River, they are leaving part of their bed uncovered, and that leaves the Ukrainians with an advantage elsewhere. But then the question is, do the Ukrainians have a large enough force to be able to take advantage of that? Because I don't think they have quite the force quantity that we would hope. So that if they do attack here and cause the Russians to pull reserves down from elsewhere, do they have the forces then to attack? I mean, there's one thing to hold the Russians in place and defend. There's another thing to put an offensive force together and attack with combined arms and do the best you possibly can. So those are the problems that both sides, I think, face. It's a problem of not having enough kit, not having enough troops on the ground to do exactly what they'd like. But anyway, that's again nothing particularly new other than that analysis. I think was quite useful, and I did want to talk at more length on this Kherson area because I think it's really important at the moment. This sands area, the Oleshki Sands, I think will be a useful natural barrier that if they can push from Krinky, that actually the Russians don't have an awful lot of depth of territory that they can use there, and so that might be quite a sensible place to have their attacks, or at least in several areas along there, using that desert area as a natural barrier for the Russians. Anyway, let me know what you think. If there's any more information on this that you have found out, post it below in the thread. In the meantime, take care. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Toodle pits. I'll speak to you tomorrow.